Before the MCU, superhero movies were basically isolated stories. They existed to tell one story, and that was it. And aside from a few sequels here and there, most of them didn't even bother to connect properly with what came before. Sometimes they even flat out ignored the events of their own previous films. Like the audience would just forget. Hero crossovers? Practically non-existent. But in 2008, everything changed. The MCU kicked off with a movie that seemed like just another one of those. A B-list superhero, played by a somewhat washed-up actor, thrown into theaters just to fill some space with something decent. Not only did the movie turn out great, but along the way, some extra scenes and special appearances practically screamed, "This is just the beginning." And it was. An entire universe of interconnected films was born, stacking heroes on a scale no one had ever seen before. The formula worked, and for a while it felt like everything they touched turned to gold. Even the most obscure heroes came out of nowhere and became stars. But let's be real, not everything was smooth sailing. The MCU had its highs, lows, and some downright embarrassing stumbles. Not everything they made kept the same level of excellence. In fact, far from it. That's exactly why we're ranking the MCU's productions today, including the series. Because honestly, someone needs to bring some order to this chaos. Before we get started, a few disclaimers. First, this ranking is based on my opinions, with a sprinkle of input on what the general audience seems to think about these productions. I can recognize the merits of a film or series, even if I didn't enjoy it personally, but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore my own feelings about it. So if your favorite movie ends up lower than you think it deserves, you have three options. Cry, try to convince me in the comments, or make your own list. Just kidding, but seriously, there's nothing I can do about it. It's how I felt while watching. Second, I didn't rewatch everything before making this video because that would take about 10 years, and I don't have that kind of time. So if I forget a detail or it seems like I didn't give enough attention to a certain title, oh well, that's life. Now without further ado, let's get into the ranking. 46, Miss Marvel, 2022, series. This might and will sound unfair, but Miss Marvel is here simply because it's the only MCU production I didn't finish watching. It's a series aimed at teenagers. It's just not for me. Maybe one day I'll give it another shot and rank it properly. 45, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, 2022, series. She-Hulk tried to be a comedy, a courtroom drama, an action series, and a meta fourth wall breaking show. It didn't succeed at any of those. Hulk spent 14 years developing his character, learning to control and understand his powers. He went through almost everything in that time. Exile, harsh conditions, exile in another country, persecution, exile on another planet, prejudice, exile within his own soul, and the fear of others. She-Hulk? She resolved all those issues in half an episode. The series' humor is incredibly weak. The courtroom plot lines are shallow and silly, and her performance as a lawyer is over the top, failing to make us root for her. The action sequences are pointless and very underwhelming. Classic rivals pop up and then disappear without resolution, as if the writers simply forgot about them. The fourth wall breaking moments are unfunny and add nothing to the show. It feels like the series is screaming, "Look how smart and meta we are," when all it really says is, "Look how unfunny and directionless we are." The show is just a string of events with everything and nothing happening at the same time. Abomination's Namaste arc? Absolutely horrendous. The finale is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It's hard to put into words how much I hate this series. Bad CGI doesn't even bother me, and painting all men as villains in relationships is so childish that it's not even worth discussing. Simply put, this series is atrocious. 44, Echo, 2024, series. I'll be honest, Echo is the character I'm least interested in across the entire MCU. Zero charisma. The actress's performance ranges from mediocre to bad. The character herself has potential, but no one cares. The story feels completely secondary and unlikely to grab fans' attention. Yet another production falling victim to the MCU's mindset of anything we make will be a hit. 43, Thor, Love and Thunder, 2022. If Thor Ragnarok made us believe that humor had revitalized the character, Thor Love and Thunder came along to remind us that excess is the worst enemy of any formula. The film is basically an unfunny comedy that throws away two of the most phenomenal arcs the character ever had in the comics. Gore the God Butcher and Jane as Thor. How? With shallow writing, stupid and excessive humor, a nonsensical story, and desperate attempts to use the death of certain characters to add weight to the plot. And the gods? A parade of silly caricatures, completely devoid of depth or respect for the mythology they were supposed to embody. Not to mention the thinly veiled critique of religion, which was entirely out of place. To sum it up in two words, wasteful stupidity. It might be a technically better production than some ranked higher, but it's here because of the sheer scale of wasted potential. 42, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, 2023. Another Marvel movie where they insist on throwing in a young genius character just because they can. The quantum realm, which should have been a bizarre, dangerous, and mind-bending place where the laws of physics break down, is reduced to nothing more than a subatomic world full of weird creatures and a psychedelic screensaver-like background. The villain, who was supposed to be menacing, ends up being defeated by ants. Yes, ants. The Wasp's name is in the title just to take up space because she contributes absolutely nothing to the plot. The movie is packed with dumb scenes, adds nothing to the MCU, and doesn't develop a single character. In short, a visually exhausting, narratively pointless experience. 41. Thor, The Dark World, 2013. Thor. The Dark World is so generic it feels like it was written by an algorithm. No offense to IA, of course. The villain is forgettable, the secondary monster is just another boring big guy, and the plot drags with zero impact. Thor and Jane's romance? Snooze fest. The scientist's role in the finale? Completely forgettable. Thor's Asgardian friends? Fancy decorations at best. Nothing in this movie adds to Thor's character or the MCU as a whole. Even Frigga's death, which tries to inject some emotional weight, feels more like an excuse to get rid of a character no one knew what to do with. Honestly, you can skip this one without feeling the slightest bit of guilt. 40. Ant-Man and the Wasp, 2018. They promised this movie would be essential for Avengers. Endgame and delivered. A post-credits scene that could have just been an email. Paul Rudd tries to save the movie with his humor, but even he can't carry something so uninteresting. The villain has weak motivations, and to make it worse, the solutions at the end are even more underwhelming. And once again, the Wasp's name is there just to pad the title. Her relevance? Pretty much zero. This movie is so forgettable that even the quantum realm seems more exciting in comparison. 39. The Marvels, 2023. The Marvels is basically a light show full of colorful beam fights, wrapped up in a failed attempt at being funny. The movie is weak. The villain is so unremarkable, you can barely remember her name, and the final sacrifice doesn't evoke emotion. It just makes you feel tired. Oh, and Beast shows up at the end, but honestly, who cares? Yet another post-credits scene trying to artificially give importance to the movie and relevance to the Marvel Universe. 38. Secret Invasion 2023 series. With a promising premise, Secret Invasion disappoints in its execution. The espionage storyline, which could have been dark and intense, becomes predictable and lacks meaningful twists. Supposedly, we were going to see Nick Fury at his best and learn how the Skrulls had infiltrated humanity. Instead, Fury does absolutely nothing until the last episode, where he finally takes action and still manages to do nothing. The Skrulls' infiltration plot is unnecessarily restrained and filled with exposition. They created a problem they didn't know how to solve. Fury's promise to find the Skrulls a home, and the way they introduce the Super Skrulls completely underestimates the audience's tolerance for nonsense. The depiction of powers in the final fight, full of copied abilities and over-the-top effects, feels like one big unfunny joke, complete with Ebony Maw's powers, and even his rings magically appearing just because his DNA was used. The series delivers nothing but the downfall of Fury's character and the introduction of yet another disposable, overpowered character. 37. Hawkeye 2021 series. Clint and Kate spend more time stumbling over their own mistakes than being the heroes we expect them to be. Aside from the two leads, the performances are awful, and the weak script relies on easy solutions and a rushed ending, something that seems to be a hallmark of the MCU's weaker productions. The action? A collection of poorly choreographed scenes that fail to excite. The villains, who were supposed to be funny, are just annoying and stupid. Not even the charm of Kate, Clint, and Yelena can save this series. And even the Kingpin's appearance in the finale is completely wasted. Yet another show that overpromised and underdelivered. 36. What If? Season 3, 2021. Series animation. The third season of What If became an overdose of repetitive themes. With an entire multiverse of possibilities at their disposal, the series somehow managed to choose the most generic and boring options imaginable. Sure, there were one or two interesting episodes, but nothing truly innovative or meaningful was delivered. By the end of the season, it felt like the show should have been renamed Captain Carter, considering how much screen time she got. Honestly, they might as well give her a standalone series instead of forcing her importance into every single episode. It could actually be good. Meanwhile, the original concept of exploring infinite possibilities, completely lost. 35. What If? Season 2, 2021. Series animation. The second season brought one or two original and interesting ideas, but the rest was basically a Captain Carter overload that no one asked for and failed to be engaging. The final episode is an absolute mess, filled with yet another uninspired color beam battle and the destruction of everything that worked in the first season. Most notably, the Supreme Strange arc, which was reduced to nothing and threw away the character's redemption from the previous season. Watching Captain Carter defeat villains just because was already annoying, but the scene with villains awkwardly hopping in and out of portals managed to be the dumbest moment of the series. A complete waste of such a promising concept. 34. Black Widow, 2021. Black Widow arrived late to the MCU's timeline with a plot that doesn't do justice to Natasha Romanoff's importance. The expectation was a deep dive into her dark past, but instead we got a generic script, poorly executed scenes, and a villain so forgettable you'll barely remember his name. The film's resolutions are downright pathetic, and the much-hyped passing of the torch to Yelena Belova is, at best, promising, but far from organic. What should have been a heartfelt tribute to Natasha ended up feeling more like a favor to those scavenging through Marvel's pile of rejected ideas. 33. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, 2022. The movie had the unenviable task of dealing with Chadwick Boseman's absence, but it gets lost in unnecessary subplots and a painfully slow narrative. Namor, who was supposed to be an imposing villain, has confusing motivations and logic that doesn't hold up. One moment he wants peace with Wakanda, and the next he's killing someone important there. The visuals of Namor's underwater kingdom are a complete disaster, resembling a blurry night drive without glasses or headlights. Shuri as Black Panther was expected, but her character development is shallow. The overuse of CGI suits, which look like they were pulled straight out of Power Rangers, is unbearable and strips the characters of any personality. To top it all off, Riri Williams is introduced as yet another artificially created young genius that nobody asked for. Despite its good intentions, the film is filled with frustrating choices. 32. Loki, 2021, Season 1. Loki managed to bring the multiverse to the forefront of the MCU in a creative way, introducing captivating characters along the way. Tom Hiddleston, as always, delivers an impeccable performance, and the introduction of Kang adds an intriguing layer to the story. The TVA, the Void, and the various Loki variants are well-executed concepts, and visually, the series has some standout moments. The downside: Loki's transformation into a bumbling, less imposing character than he should be, especially considering his journey up to this point. Despite some inconsistencies in pacing, the series has its merits and manages to stand out within the MCU. 31. Iron Man 3, 2013. Let's be honest, the villain is basically Wesker from Resident Evil. The plot twist of the Mandarin being just an actor does have some comedic charm, but it's so out of place it feels like a joke in the wrong context. The idea of Tony Stark having to rely on his wits instead of his armor could have been interesting, but it ends up making the movie feel sluggish. And of course, we're treated to yet another unnecessary child genius that nobody asked for. The villain's generic superpower and an equally generic finale don't do much to salvage the production. In the end, Iron Man 3 could have been good, but it falls somewhere in the middle. Not offensive, but definitely not memorable. 30. Captain Marvel, 2019. Captain Marvel delivers Carol Danvers' origin story, but fails to establish any emotional connection with the audience. The script is generic, and the protagonist's development is so shallow that it's hard to care about her journey. The way Carol's powers are portrayed doesn't help either. Just stating that she's super powerful without any meaningful development feels, and is incredibly artificial. Overall, it's an unremarkable film that seems more focused on filling in gaps in the MCU timeline than on telling a compelling story. 29. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, 2022. If it weren't for Sam Raimi, this movie would have been a total disaster. While his creative direction and unique touch give the film some flair, the plot drags and is riddled with conveniences. Wanda's motivation is confusing and completely undermines her entire character arc from WandaVision. And the much-hyped multiverse? They promised infinite worlds and delivered lazy fan service with cameos that barely make sense. Doctor Strange, Chavez, and Wanda's powers appear and disappear whenever the plot demands, with zero consistency or logic. The ending pleased almost no one and added very little to the MCU's supposedly pivotal multiverse storyline. And that CGI eyeball on Strange's forehead? Let's not even go there. Raimi saved the film from total failure, but it's still far from being memorable. 28. Iron Man 2, 2010. Iron Man 2 is a textbook example of a movie that tried to do too much at once and failed at almost everything. The script is messy, and the villains, while initially promising, are completely underutilized. The attempt to expand the Marvel Universe in preparation for the Avengers ended up overshadowing Tony Stark's development, which deserved far more attention. The plot about ownership of the suit technology had potential, but it's so drawn out that it loses any real impact. The overlapping villains only make things more confusing and less engaging. Still, there are a few good moments, like the F1 race sequence, but they aren't enough to save the movie. 27. Spider-Man: Far From Home, 2019. Far From Home manages to be entertaining, but it lacks the emotional weight that other Spider-Man films have. Mysterio is a creative villain, but over time, the logical flaws in his elaborate setups become glaringly obvious. Everything works only because the script says it should, and a second viewing only highlights these issues. On top of that, Tom Holland's Peter Parker shows little growth here, and at times even seems to regress, relying too heavily on Stark's technology. That said, the movie delivers some interesting scenes and keeps a good pace, even if it doesn't quite reach the level you'd expect from a Spider-Man film. 26. The Incredible Hulk, 2008. While it delivers a more brutal Hulk and a few solid action scenes, the film struggles due to its lack of meaningful connection with the broader MCU. The villain, though initially promising, lacks charisma, leaving the story without much emotional impact. The final battle is visually striking and entertaining, but the journey to get there feels uneventful and forgettable. It's far from a bad movie, but it doesn't leave a lasting impression either. 25. Eternals, 2021. Eternals is visually stunning and aimed to be a deeper, more thought-provoking production, but it ended up being a long, tiresome film with mostly uncharismatic characters. The portrayal of their powers divided opinions. While some Eternals feel useful, others seem to exist just to fill the roster. The plot tries to explain things no one really cared to know, leaves loose ends no one is eager to see tied up, and suffers from its lack of connection to the rest of the MCU, further weakening its impact. That said, there are some good scenes, and the concepts introduced had potential, but that potential was squandered by poor execution. 24. Thor, 2011. As an introduction to the God of Thunder, Thor gets the job done, but it's weighed down by a simple narrative and a completely underutilized villain. The chemistry between Thor and Jane Foster feels forced. Thor's bleached eyebrows are questionable, and his Asgardian friends come across more like fancy extras than meaningful characters. That said, the movie is important for expanding the MCU's cosmic side, even if it's not exactly memorable. It works as a first step, but it falls short in terms of impact and execution. 23. Ant-Man 2015. Ant-Man brought an interesting mix of heist movie and superhero action, offering a refreshing change of pace for the MCU. Paul Rudd delivers a charismatic and fun hero, and some inventive sequences help the film stand out. On the downside, the villain is generic, and the predictable plot limits the movie's overall impact. Plus, the internal logic of the suit's mechanics is inconsistent, which drags the experience down a notch. It's entertaining, but far from unforgettable. 22. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier 2021 series. The series tries to tackle important social themes and explore Captain America's legacy, but struggles with pacing issues and poorly developed villains. The expectations it sets are never quite met, and the finale resolves everything in an overly simplistic way, with a speech that, while well-meaning, fails to truly convince. On the bright side, Sam Wilson's evolution into the new Captain America is a highlight, and the dynamic between Sam and Bucky works well. However, despite these merits, the disappointing ending leaves the series firmly in the could-have-been-better category. 21. Moon Knight 2022 series. Oscar Isaac delivers an excellent performance, but the series struggles to balance mysticism with action. The idea of keeping things intentionally confusing to connect us to the character makes the intriguing plot lose its way at times. The character has great potential, even as a more secondary figure. Unfortunately, the resolution at the end feels rushed, simplistic, and lacking in significant consequences. While it introduces some interesting concepts, they feel disconnected from the rest of the MCU. 20. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings 2021. Shang-Chi surprises with incredible action sequences and flawless fight choreography, as well as a rich mythology that brings a refreshing vibe to the MCU. The protagonist is charismatic and carries the story well, though the third act stumbles into the usual MCU trap of generic group battles, which drains some of the excitement. Though honestly, I don't mind CGI overload as much as others. It's a bit odd that such an ancient and powerful organization managed to go unnoticed for so long, but plot holes like this are almost inevitable when introducing new characters. Even so, it's a fun movie that works well, despite the familiar MCU cliches. 19. WandaVision 2021 series. With an innovative concept, WandaVision starts off as an emotional character study and a creative take on Wanda's grief. However, the generic finale weakens the overall experience, with a colorful beam battle that feels out of place compared to the series' initial tone. The sword subplot drags the story down rather than adding to it, and the mysteries teased, like the X-Men's Quicksilver and hints about Mephisto, end up leading nowhere. Despite its flaws, the series was important for expanding the MCU in a unique way, offering something different from the usual productions. Even with its shortcomings, it stood out for its originality. 18. Avengers: Age of Ultron 2015. Age of Ultron doesn't match the impact of the first Avengers movie, but it does a decent job of expanding the universe and introducing important characters. That said, the resolution of certain arcs drew plenty of criticism. Quicksilver's death is widely seen as a dumb moment, Hulk's exile feels forced, and Nick Fury becomes increasingly irrelevant as the Avengers leader. Ultron, who was meant to be a standout villain, ends up being far less threatening than expected, and his so-called age lasts only a few days. Despite its flaws, the movie delivers solid action sequences and some fun moments, but it's far from an epic. 17. Captain America: The First Avenger 2011. The movie serves as a solid introduction to Captain America, effectively exploring Steve Rogers' background and his transformation into a super soldier. The character development is handled with care, though the middle section of the film feels a bit, or very, dragged out. The action is engaging, and the conclusion maintains the quality, leaving a good overall impression. I watched it back when it first came out and still have fond memories of it, though it might lose some of its shine on a rewatch. For now, it earns its spot for being an important piece in the MCU. 16. Doctor Strange 2016. Visually stunning, Doctor Strange introduces the mystical side of the MCU in a creative and innovative way. Stephen Strange's journey is well constructed, but the film spends so much time explaining his past that it ends up rushing through his training as a sorcerer. This makes his rapid evolution feel a bit artificial, undermining the sense that he's truly earned his powers. Dormammu, while an imposing presence, is underutilized, though the clever conclusion helps make up for some of the film's shortcomings. That said, the movie leaves a few loose ends that were never resolved, which lessens its overall impact on the MCU. A good film, but one that had the potential to be even better. 15. What If Season 1, 2021 Series Animation. The premise of What If is intriguing and creative, but the execution is inconsistent. Some episodes explore fascinating possibilities in a thoughtful and imaginative way, while others are forgettable or downright ridiculous. The forced humor in certain episodes doesn't land and disrupts the series' pacing. However, the final episodes significantly elevate the quality, delivering an epic conclusion that ties the various stories together well. This late-game turnaround helps place the series a bit higher in the ranking, despite its earlier missteps. 14. Captain America Civil War 2016. Civil War is one of the MCU's most impactful films, balancing action and drama well. The conflict between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark is brimming with potential, but the execution feels rushed. The scale of the war is laughably smaller compared to the comic book arc, where the confrontation is prolonged, epic, and involves countless characters. In the movie, it boils down to a 6-on-6 battle at an airport, which undermines the grandeur of the concept. Zemo's plan, while creative in theory, relies heavily on coincidences and improbable events he couldn't possibly predict, which hurts its credibility. That said, the movie is entertaining, with solid action scenes and the bonus of introducing Black Panther and Spider-Man in memorable ways. 13. Loki Season 2 2023 Series. The second season of Loki expanded the concept of the multiverse in a visually stunning way, but stumbled with its confusing narrative. It started with high expectations, dragged in the middle, but the final episode made up for everything. The idea of Loki spending thousands of years honing his abilities and exploring every possibility elevated the character to a completely new level, fixing the bumbling image from the first season. Loki's ultimate sacrifice, becoming the god of time, was emotional and the perfect cherry on top, delivering an epic conclusion to the season. Without the final episode, the season would have ranked much lower, but its resolution secured it as one of the MCU's most impactful moments. 12. Spider-Man Homecoming 2017. Homecoming introduces a young, charismatic Peter Parker with a lighthearted tone that fits well within the MCU. The Vulture, brilliantly portrayed by Michael Keaton, stands out as one of the franchise's best villains, providing a more personal and believable threat for the hero. The plot is simple, but serves its purpose of entertaining and firmly establishing Spider-Man in this universe. However, it does borrow a bit too much from other versions of the hero, such as the boat scene reminiscent of Tobey Maguire's iconic train sequence. Even so, the film does a great job presenting the character and remains an enjoyable experience. 11. Thor Ragnarok 2017. Taika Waititi breathed new life into the Thor franchise with vibrant visuals and plenty of humor. However, while the humor works in many moments, it starts to feel overdone, undermining the weight of certain scenes. Once again, Odin's death feels like the writers didn't know what to do with him, leaving an unsatisfying sense of waste. The lack of seriousness in many of the characters dilutes the impact of the main storyline, which often feels forgotten by the audience. And the continued irrelevance of Thor's Asgardian friends remains an annoying issue. Despite these flaws, the movie is fun, easy to watch, and deserves credit for revitalizing Thor's character. 10. Iron Man 2008. The movie that kicked off the MCU Iron Man remains relevant to this day. Robert Downey Jr. delivered an iconic performance, turning Tony Stark into one of the most beloved characters in cinema. The grounded, more realistic tone of the hero, clearly inspired by Nolan's Batman, set the template for the Marvel Universe's success. The downside? The villain and the final battle lack impact. And let's be honest, it's hard not to laugh at the sheer cluelessness of the kidnappers as they watch Tony build an entire armored suit without questioning a thing. That said, the movie is entertaining, develops its character well, and stands as one of the MCU's most important pillars. 9. Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3, 2023. Wrapping up the trilogy on an emotional note, Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3 dives deeper into its characters and strikes a good balance between action and heartfelt moments. However, the film's attempt to make us care about Rocket's cellmates felt forced and overly reminiscent of Toy Story. The ending is a bit too convenient, and the villain fails to maintain the level of threat he should have represented. And Adam Warlock as a bumbling fool? Hard to swallow. Even so, the Guardians continue to deliver at a high level, and these criticisms only serve to set it apart from the group's other films without detracting from its fun and emotional essence. 8. Guardians of the Galaxy, 2014. With smart humor and charismatic characters, Guardians of the Galaxy stylishly expanded Marvel's cosmic universe. The group's chemistry works surprisingly well, even though their formation happens rather quickly. The iconic soundtrack and the diversity of characters won over audiences, making this one of the MCU's most memorable films. The downside lies in the final resolution, which, while creative, undermines some of the dramatic weight of the moment. Additionally, Ronan, who should have been a formidable villain, spends the entire movie without actually doing much. Even so, it's a standout, fun film that set the tone for the franchise. 7. Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2, 2017. The second Guardians movie maintains the humor and chemistry of the first, but goes further by deepening the character's development. The conclusion is emotional and impactful, standing as one of the MCU's most touching moments. The blend of action and humor is so well executed that it might just be the best balance in the franchise. Unlike other Guardians films, Vol. 2 doesn't have any glaring flaws, which elevates it above the rest. It's fun, heartfelt, and strengthens the audience's bond with the characters, solidifying its place as one of the MCU's best. 6. Captain America: The Winter Soldier, 2014. The Winter Soldier is a political action thriller that elevates the MCU to a more mature level. The plot is engaging, and the dynamic between Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes is expertly handled, adding emotional weight to their conflict. The action sequences are spectacular, with standout fight choreography, especially in the hand-to-hand combat scenes. The twist involving Nick Fury is genuinely surprising and keeps the suspense alive until the end. It's a movie that grips you from start to finish, striking the perfect balance between drama and action, solidifying Captain America as one of the MCU's cornerstone characters. 5. Spider-Man: No Way Home, 2021. I'll never watch this movie again, and you know why? I don't want to lose the magic of how it felt the first time I saw it. It might seem unfair to rank it this high, but it's driven by the sheer emotion it delivered. Yes, there are logical flaws in the script, and a final solution that feels borderline artificial, but none of that matters. The fan service, unlike in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, is well done and fully functional. The action is well balanced, and Tom Holland's Peter Parker finally matures into the Spider-Man we've been waiting for. Maybe if I watch it again, it'll drop a few spots, but for now, it remains an unforgettable MCU experience. If not for the gaping plot holes, it might have ranked even higher. 4. Black Panther, 2018. With powerful cultural representation and a complex villain, Black Panther stood out as a global phenomenon. Wakanda is impeccably crafted, with stunning settings and costumes that brought one of the MCU's richest worlds to life. The interactions between characters feel natural, and the film's thematic depth elevates it above many other Marvel productions. The plot is engaging and well-constructed, with impactful twists and a worthy conclusion, though the final battle, which looks like something out of a PlayStation 2 game, is a bit disappointing. Even with that flaw, the cultural impact and technical quality secure its spot as one of the MCU's best films. 3. The Avengers, 2012. Some might say The Avengers hasn't aged well, but I completely disagree. The movie blends action, character development, humor, epic moments, and a direct impact on the MCU's future. It strikes a perfect balance featuring hero versus hero confrontations and team dynamics that never feel forced. Moreover, it was a cultural milestone at the time, bringing together a team of heroes that worked just as well together as they did individually. It's a film that may not shine as brightly as it did upon release, but it still holds its importance as a cornerstone of the MCU and pop culture. It defined an era. 2. Avengers Endgame 2019, the pinnacle of the MCU. Endgame is the perfect conclusion to over a decade of stories, delivering emotional moments, epic battles, and a worthy send-off for iconic characters. Unlike the rushed exits of some characters in the past, the farewells to Iron Man, Captain America, and Black Widow were handled with perfection, each imbued with the emotional weight it deserved. While the logic of all the Avengers needing to retrieve the Infinity Stones can be questioned, especially since one of them, like Captain America, could have handled it all alone, as shown when he returns the stones, this doesn't overshadow the overall experience. What keeps the movie from taking the top spot in the ranking is the disappointing use of certain characters in the final battle. Doctor Strange spends the entire fight holding a dam, Hulk has to be rescued by Ant-Man and barely participates in the combat. Thor remains depressed throughout the movie and doesn't show his true potential, and the Black Order once again proves to be pointless. Despite these shortcomings, Endgame remains a masterpiece and one of the MCU's greatest achievements. 1. Avengers Infinity War 2018. With an impressive balance of countless characters and a bold narrative, Infinity War left its mark on the MCU by making Thanos the true protagonist and delivering a devastating ending. The gradual buildup of the threat and the film's epic scale make it one of the franchise's most unforgettable entries. The action is continuous and seamless, giving every character a chance to shine. The film's peak is the battle on Titan against Thanos, with the standout confrontation between Iron Man and Doctor Strange, two of the MCU's cornerstones, being especially brilliant. The only minor downside is how easily the Black Order is defeated, but this hardly detracts from the overall experience. The ending left the world in shock, sparking a global conversation about how the snap could possibly be reversed. Alongside Endgame, it stands as the cultural event of its generation and the film that best exemplifies the sheer grandeur of the MCU. Summarizing the ranking, here's the MCU tier list. Ms. Marvel stands alone as the only unwatched by me production. At the bottom, She-Hulk, Echo, Thor, Love and Thunder, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Thor. The Dark World are all problematic, forgettable, erratic, and ultimately unnecessary to watch. Slightly above, but still disappointing, are Ant-Man and the Wasp, The Marvels, Secret Invasion, Hawkeye, What If, Seasons 2 and 3, Black Widow, and Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. These had potential but failed due to a lack of creativity, real impact, and relevance. To be honest, they're simply not enjoyable. Next, Loki, Season 1, Iron Man 3, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Iron Man 2, and Spider-Man, Far From Home all have their moments but remain flawed in various ways. At this stage, we start to see some good ideas, yet they don't fully deliver. In the genuinely enjoyable but divisive tier, we have The Incredible Hulk, Eternals, Thor, Ant-Man, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Moon Knight, Shang-Chi, WandaVision, and Avengers: Age of Ultron. These have their strengths but aren't universally loved. One step short of perfection: Captain America, The First Avenger, Doctor Strange, What If, Season 1, Captain America, Civil War, Spider-Man, Homecoming, and Thor. Ragnarok stand as great examples of how to craft a superhero movie. Among the best of the best, Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy. Vol 1, 2, and 3, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Black Panther are virtually perfect, with only minor, negligible flaws keeping them from absolute greatness. At the very top, the Avengers. Avengers, Endgame, and Avengers. Infinity War represent the pinnacle of superhero filmmaking. These three films encapsulate everything great about the MCU, refining and elevating it to a level never seen before. In the end, the MCU is a roller coaster of quality, with epic highs and some questionable lows. Some productions redefine the superhero genre, while others, well, let's just say they could have stayed in Marvel's drafts. But ultimately, what really matters is the impact these movies and shows had on pop culture and the audience. Regardless of the ranking, every fan has their favorites and disappointments, and that diversity of opinions only proves how much the MCU has shaped a generation. Now I want to hear from you. What would your ranking look like? Do you agree with mine, or do you think I was too harsh on some titles? Let me know in the comments, and let's keep the discussion going. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next ranking. Post-production disclaimer. Before creating this video, I had only watched Avengers Endgame once in theaters. But after finishing the script, I felt the need to rewatch it. And so I did. My overall impression hasn't changed. The movie delivers some fantastic moments, heartfelt farewells, and epic scenes. However, on a second viewing, I realized that the inconsistencies, plot conveniences, questionable choices, and unnecessary scenes were more glaring than I initially thought. I might need to make a separate video to dive deeper into these issues, but to summarize, the movie should go down some positions. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy Endgame a lot, and it remains a great conclusion to the saga. But on closer inspection, it carries some avoidable flaws that hold it back from being the masterpiece it could have been. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. Before you go, I just want to leave a quick note and make a small ask. This is a one-man show. I started 3 channels while balancing a full-time job and family life. The links to the other 2 are in the description in case you're curious. Right now, I can't afford a proper editor or professional audio equipment, which is why you'll sometimes hear AI-generated voice and see modest editing. I know it's not perfect, but it's built on genuine passion. My love for all of these subjects and the drive to share opinions, analysis, and stories that don't always get the attention they deserve. If you'd like to support this project, you don't need to spend anything. Just subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing the video already helps a ton. Every bit of support keeps this going and brings it closer to the quality I'm aiming for.